Hello, Internet. Sorry it has been so long since the last episode. It's time to finally finish off the NES shooters. Except we're all out of the ones of the horizontal or vertical persuasion. And what we have left is all sorts of crazy angles going on. First off, let's do the isometric shooters. Let's start off strong with Isolated Warrior. Developed by Kid, who developed some other underrated NES games like Low G-Man, G.I. Joe, and Kickmaster, you control Max Maverick, or Max Warrior in Japan, who has to stop the invasion of a planet single-handedly. Yes, he is a complete badass. The game controls well, with Max being able to move at a decent clip and can leap pretty high to avoid bullets and do some minor platforming. Really, the only gripe is the music is only okay, and sometimes you can get weapons that don't shoot straight, making it kinda hard to hit foes. Other than that, this one's pretty good, and like most of the other Kid games, it's kinda sorta uncommon to find, but isn't worth a whole lot of money, so pick it up if you can find it. Next we have Captain Skyhawk by Rare. Yeah, Rare's games are pretty legendary on the N64, but the games on the NES are a mixed bag. This one is kinda bleh. You play as Captain Skyhawk who has to stop some aliens. Of course. The game plays pretty similar to the arcade classic Zaxxon, except kinda more straightforward, with pseudo 3D landscapes and adjustable altitude. Now, while the game has different mission types, I couldn't really get into it. It's really easy to run into the landscape and the sides of the hills, despite having some nice upbeat music. There's also none during gameplay, which is always kind of boring. Kinda meh. Yes, technically it is just a horizontal shooter, but it is at sort of an angle. This game sucks. Yeah, I know, it's an early NES game, but it is still really boring. Based on the 1985 arcade game, it is really uninteresting. So you can move up and down, shooting enemies, gaining new parts to form a robot to gain firepower. There is no end, as it's the high score type of game. There are bosses, but not very exciting ones. You can go underground to gain more robot parts, but I feel like this is just a way to change the background, which are pretty boring to look at. The music on the overworld is bad, but the underworld music is atrocious. It makes me want to never go underground. Sorry to any fans of this game, but it's bad. Well, that's it for the isometric ones. Let's do the ones that are kind of in a third, first person sort of view. Top Gun! Yeah, of course. There isn't anything as much 80s as Top Gun. So it makes sense there are several games on the NES. The first one is pretty underwhelming. Made by Konami, it's a pretty ho-hum game. Like Captain Skyhawk, there's no in-game music, which always makes it more boring. And, it's just really not that exciting. It's pretty hard, too. Moving on to the sequel is a lot better. The action is a lot faster, there's really intense music, and it's even harder than the first one somehow. It's also got a 2-player dogfight mode, which you can blast your friend, which is always kind of fun. The only big complaint that there's a missile selection screen, and it doesn't really make sense because all the missiles kill all the enemies in one hit anyway. But regardless, it's pretty fun.
Game over.
Let's keep the 80s going with Airwolf. Based on the show, this is a so-so shooter where you shoot enemies and complete simple tasks. The graphics are pretty lacking, where the machine guns are just white circles and the missiles are red circles. Yay! I mean, look at the ground. There aren't even different colors to show you how fast you're going. To play, find your objectives on the map and either blow up an airfield tower, or you will have to go into a side perspective to refuel or rescue hostages. These parts suck, as the control is terrible. The first time you won't even realize as your copter falls like a stone if you don't press up right away. Once you get past the crappy control, you can see that these screens are basically pointless as no enemies try to kill you, and you will only die from your incompetent piloting. It's a so-so game. Even more 80s with Knight Rider. This game is also pretty lackluster. First off, you're driving in a first-person perspective, but it kind of feels like if Kit was on extreme suspension and is like 12 feet off the ground. You also have a jump button and an arsenal of weapons. You can upgrade Kit between missions, but the actual game is just filled with text all trying to be witty from the show, and the missions just seem to drag on forever. Yeah, also mediocre. What do you take if you take Thunderblade and try to put it on the NES and not do a great job at doing it? You get F-15 City War. Despite some decent graphics for the NES, it's really boring and repetitive. The first mission seems to go on forever, and I never made it past level 1. Thankfully, the demo shows off some of the different things, like a boss battle and a terrible demo of the vertical scrolling section, where the person dies in like a second. They tried to do some nice things here, but there's no avoiding the fact that this is a very boring game. Afterburner. Now, Afterburner is of course a classic Sega arcade machine, but this is definitely not a great port. Graphically, it's actually pretty impressive for the NES. I'm actually really impressed with the kind of scrolling effects with the bushes and the sea, but the control is pretty wonky. Just a slight tap to the left or right will radically turn the plane. This makes it really jarring and radical to turn and avoid enemies. Definitely not the best version of the game, but I guess it's better than some of the others in this genre. Like many Codemasters games, MiG-29 mixes different genres. There's a very mediocre third-person section. Even though there's different weapons to choose from, it's pretty boring to play. I've never been a fan of using dots to show perspective. It just doesn't look that great. And now I do have to give props for the 3D effect on the airstrip. Unfortunately, the game is pretty dull and not very fun. Wow, a lot of these shooters are based on movies and TV, because here's another one! Now, this is a very poorly made game, with crappy graphics, bad play control, and you can play as either Planeteers in the ship, or Cap himself. Unfortunately, I lost the footage as the captain, and this game sucks too much to make me play it again. Design of the levels is really poor, where you can go seconds without anything happening. God, it's bad. This game mixes horizontal maze type of game with a horizontal shooter. It's definitely not the best game in the world, but it's fun in short bursts. The ship operates like a gravity-based game, and rooms are always filled with different obstacles. Well, not being the best game in the world, it can be a little bit fun. Alright, here we go. This is a fun little game based on Dungeons and Dragons. In Dragon Strike, you control a dragon and you have to complete certain objectives in order to beat each level. Once you get past that, you'll have a boss to deal with. You can change between 2 different altitudes and several different weapons. The graphics are pretty decent, the music's kind of weak, but it's a decent game otherwise. Is a pretty cool top-down roaming shooter by Codemasters, again. You pilot a helicopter completing missions. The interesting thing about this game is the control scheme, where you turn the copter assisted by the little reticle, and you can either go forward or backward, or in the direction that the reticle points. It's pretty easy to pick up and master. In addition to destroying enemy bases, you will have other tasks like rescuing POWs, which happens in a cool third-person perspective. This is probably one of the best roaming shooters I played for the NES, and it's a pretty solid gaming experience. Hunt for Red October. Technically not a roamer in the general sense, but it plays kind of more methodical and kind of like Cybernoid with obstacles. Of course, this is yet another movie-based game, and I guess isn't horrible. The sub controls adequately with being able to shoot up and to the right. It's not very fun to play, and it goes at a really slow pace. And I can't stop dying, so yeah. Predicus conflict. I am Predicus. Let's pile the crap on with the Predicus conflict. Made by Color Dreams. Yay. It tries to be a little more ambitious than the typical Color Dreams shit. By mixing space adventure with the gameplay, you're able to go planet by planet, getting money to buy fuel and weapons. But like most Color Dreams games, the actual gameplay is pretty underwhelming. You move thrust-based, kind of like Asteroids, but it is a lot worse than the control. It just feels really off the way you move. Regardless, it's somewhat slightly better than the terrible shooters that Color Dreams made. So I guess that's better. I don't know, try it for yourself if that sort of game interests you. Jesus Christ, another movie licensed game. This one was sloppily pasted on through the movie and really just has nothing to do with the actual film. This game is terrible. You can go right or left above this space thingy and fight enemies that you see. The real problem is certain parts of the spaceship can actually kill you. And to be honest, you can't tell will kill you. And you also can accelerate to crazy speeds, which means you will die. You just pretty much get killed over and over again playing this game. And it is not at all fun. This early NES title is pretty underwhelming. First off, you control a chopper, like Firehawk, except it's very boring. The level design is very open and blank, with only a small amount that is able to even be destroyed or even attack you. There is very little fun to be had here. Solar Jetman! This gravity shooter by Rare is like the rest of the roaming shooters on the NES. Overwhelmingly mediocre. This game seems decent at first, with cool objectives like bringing things back to the base and traveling through wormholes, but the control of your pod is bad. The problem isn't acceleration or turning, rather, you can't really stop, and it seems like take forever to come to an actual halt, which is a real problem when the walls will just kill you. Fortunately, when your pod breaks, you can continue in your spacesuit, and the control of your guy is actually pretty good. You can also get a shield to protect your little pod from damage. Unfortunately, you can't grab items when you have your shield on. So you're gonna probably have a little bit of fun out of this one. Thank God that is over. There were so many mediocre games. It's time to move away from shooters finally, and go to something that the NES is a little bit known for. That is platformers. Till next time.